You ever wish you could just, I don't know, download the brain of one of the smartest people who ever lived? Well, today we're kind of going to do that. We're diving into the intellectual operating system of Charlie Munger, the absolute legend. And it all kicks off with this one simple but really powerful idea. It all starts with a saying you've probably heard before. Munger loved to use this one to point out a huge, fundamental flaw in how most of us think. See, he believed that your greatest strength, well, it can also be your biggest weakness, especially when you fall in love with just one tool in your toolbox. And that's when every problem starts to look like a nail. Munger actually had a name for this, the man with a hammer syndrome. And look, it's not just some clever little phrase. He saw it as a really dangerous mental trap. It's that tendency we all have, right? To just reach for the same old familiar solution for every single problem we face, even when it's totally the wrong fit. So who's the guy who saw this so clearly? Well, that's our guy, Charlie Munger. He was way more than just a billionaire investor. You gotta think of him as an architect, but for thinking. He spent his life building a better way to think, a whole system designed to avoid that hammer and nail trap. So most people know him as the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett's partner, but he was so much more than that. I mean, Munger was the one who really pushed Buffett to change his whole game, to move beyond buying those cheap cigar butt companies and start investing in truly great businesses for the long haul. And it makes total sense when you think about it that his personal hero was Ben Franklin. Why? Because Franklin was a polymath, a guy who knew that real wisdom isn't just stuck in one little box. It's spread out across all the big fields of knowledge. Okay, so if having only a hammer is the problem, what's the solution? For Munger, the answer was just brilliant. He'd say, you don't need a better hammer, you need a whole toolbox. And he had a name for this toolbox, the Latticework of Mental Models. So here's the core of it. Munger thought that just memorizing a bunch of random, disconnected facts is completely useless. It's like having a giant pile of bricks but no blueprint. What are you going to build with that? He said that real understanding, true wisdom, only happens when all those facts connect, when they hang together on what he called a latticework of theory. So what is this latticework exactly? Well, think of it like a framework in your mind. It's built from the big, important ideas, the mental models, from a whole bunch of different subjects. And the keyword here is multiple. This is how you build your mental toolbox. You're not just collecting hammers. You're grabbing saws from physics, wrenches from psychology, and, I don't know, drills from biology. That way, you can look at any problem from all these different angles. And Munger himself put it so bluntly. He explained the danger of not having this framework. And I just love this quote. He said that if you only have one or two models, you will literally torture reality so that it fits your models. I mean, think about that. You'll actually bend and break the problem until it looks like a nail, just because a hammer is the only tool you've got. Okay, this all sounds great in theory, right? But how do you actually do it? How do you build one of these latticeworks for yourself? Well, Munger laid out a really practical way to get from the idea to actually putting it into action. It really comes down to 4 key steps. First, you got to do the work. You have to read and learn the big foundational ideas from all the major fields. Second, and this is super important, you can't just memorize them. You have to really understand them, integrate them so they become actual working models inside your head. Third, you have to use them actively. Think of it like a pilot's checklist. Before you make a big decision, you run it through your list of models. And finally, number 4, this thing is never finished. You're always adding to it, hanging your own life experiences, your wins, your losses onto the framework. That's what makes it stronger and truly yours over time. So what fields did he think were the most important? It's actually a really interesting mix. He didn't just say, oh, read business and economics books. No way. He insisted on the hard sciences. He talked about physics to understand things like equilibrium and feedback loops, biology for its lessons on evolution and complex systems, mathematics, obviously, for probability, and maybe most importantly, psychology, because you have to understand the often irrational, messy driver of, well, everything, human behavior. So how different is this, really, from how most of us actually operate day to day? Let's just put the Munger method right next to how things are commonly done. The difference is pretty stark. Think about it. Our entire education system, our careers, they all push us towards hyper-specialization. Munger was all about being multidisciplinary. Most of us, we run on gut feel or whatever happened to us last week. He used a checklist of models to really stress test every idea. We're constantly distracted by the 24/7 news cycle, while he was focused on timeless, unchanging principles. And maybe the most counterintuitive part of all, his method is deliberately slower. It actually requires sitting and thinking, which is the total opposite of our world that demands instant answers and immediate action. So you might be asking, why go through all this trouble? Well, the ultimate goal here, it isn't just about making more money or better investments. It's about something way bigger than that. It's about learning to see the world as it actually is. It's about systematically getting rid of your own blind spots so you can navigate reality better and avoid those huge catastrophic mistakes that happen when you've only got one tool in your belt. Munger, of course, had another great way of saying this. He said his goal was to avoid being a horse that can only do one thing. That's what this is all about.
Building this latticework of mental models is about developing real intellectual versatility. It's about becoming a thinker who can do a lot of things really well.
And that really brings us to the final and maybe the most important question. This one is for you to think about. If you're being totally honest with yourself, what's the main hammer you've been using over and over? What part of reality have you been, torturing to make it look like a nail? And what's the biggest blind spot in your toolkit right now because of it?